right, we are back. Agent and the Fan podcast. I'm Chris Leibel. I'm the agent. That's Lou Columna, my buddy, and he's also the fan. Guys, we got a lot to talk about today. The Baseball Hot Stove League has been on absolute fire. It's scalding. We got a special guest today, Tim Healy from Newsday. He covers the Mets, but he covers all baseball, and he's a great dude and a very knowledgeable writer. So we're going to have him joining us. He should be joining us in a couple of minutes. Lou, what's going on? A lot of things have happened since we've been on last.
A lot of things have happened, man. You know, last night Carlos Rodon with the Yanks. You know, my God. Can we talk about Carlos Correa, $350 million for 13 years? The money's out there, man. The money's out there. Everybody is trying to going for it right now. I think a lot of it had to do with the Phillies, right? You know, the Phillies came out of nowhere, and it's that old adage, like, just get into the dance, and you know, anything could happen. And I think you're seeing a lot of those signings like that because of that, I think.
Well, like you said, Lou, the thing is the money is there. The money is there, and a lot of the teams, not all of them still, but a lot of the teams are willing to spend it. And when that starts happening, it's a very good time to be a player, and it's a good time to be an agent. So,
and a fan.
You know, well, especially if you're a fan of a team that's spending money. The Yankees have spent a lot of money on two players, namely, and you know that is bolstering not only did the Yankees, and you're a Yankees fan, as I think our you know loyal you know followers but you know obviously you're bringing back a guy who had a legendary year in Aaron Judge, but then to go sign Rodon after a couple of real good years and being the top guy out there, or at least the top guy left out there, who was a difference maker, who certainly makes a lot of sense for the Yankees. We want to talk about the Mets a little bit in a minute too, but we'll wait for Tim for that because he should be joining us momentarily. But I think, you know, it's a really exciting thing because you're seeing, like you said, the Giants went out and spent all this money on Carlos Correa, and obviously he's a terrific ball player. You know, and you're seeing it's just this is a lot of fun. Trey Turner and shortstop markets, you know, everything that I think they hoped it would be. And you know, there's still some guys out there.
Yeah, I mean, there's some key guys out there. You know, Benintendi's still out there. You know, I think what's going to happen, and you know, and again, it depends on the team. You know, Nathan Eovaldi is a perfect example. He's a really good pitcher, but he has a qualifying offer, and that to a lot of teams, you know, especially to a team who is not in contention, they don't want to give up that draft pick.
There's no question the qualifying offer is definitely can jam up a player as a free agent, depending on the team, because those teams, a lot of teams are unwilling to give up those draft picks, especially the teams that you know that are more conscientious of their young players and controlling you know their salaries and things like that. So that's you know that's where it gets a little tricky, and I know we started seeing that you know that started years ago. So it's an interesting it's certainly an interesting twist to the whole free agent you know landscape.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, and this to me, I mean, you've been in this game for so long, but to me, I think that's been really something that's been more cognizant. The managers, the general managers, have been more so within the last 10 to 15 years, like, you know, guarding that draft.
No question. There's no doubt about it. We're lucky enough to be joined right now by Tim Healy. Tim is the Mets beat writer for Newsday here in New York, and Tim, you don't only do the Mets, you do some other stuff as well, right?
Mostly just Mets. This week in particular, I'm on Yankees duty since our Yankees guy is off, but mostly just Mets for me.
Yeah, the Yankees. I'm getting a call from a general manager here now. He's gonna have to wait till the podcast is over. But you have a Yankee function you have to do today?
Yeah, just they're having their annual have some Bronx kids to the stadium and give them some presents sort of deal, and they have reporters come so they can talk to Aaron Boone. So that's what I'm up to this afternoon.
Nice. Well, if you see my man Ray Negron, tell him I said hi.
Okay, we'll do.
So Tim, Tim and I have known each other for a long time. Tim's a very good guy. You know, I think Tim, to me, you're one of the nicer guys out there, in that you you do your job, but you kind of stay away from the maybe some of the infighting that goes on on the inside. But I'm glad you were able to come on and join us. I want to talk a little bit about the Mets and their offseason. I know we've talked about it a little bit on the show here, but so obviously, since we were last on, Brandon Nimmo is the big Mets story. Talk to us about Brandon Nimmo, and your thoughts on his role and kind of how that all shook down.
I love the signing for the Mets. I think coming into the offseason when they had all those free agents, DeGrom, Diaz, Nimmo, Bassett, plenty of others, I thought Nimmo was the most important free agent they had, because when you think about what he does as the leadoff hitter, getting on base all the time, running, etc., and what he does in center field, where he's turned himself into, quite a good defender, which was not always the case in center for him, then he was irreplaceable. And you look at what else was on the free agent market, or what might have been available via trade when the Mets don't really want to trade prospects right now. There was nobody out there who could give the Mets what Brandon Nimmo could, and they didn't have anybody in-house who could really do that. So I thought they basically had to re-sign Nimmo. I did not expect him to get 8 years. $162 million was a little bit more than I thought he would get. But nonetheless, that's where they ended up. And so I give credit to the Mets for realizing what they had to do and doing it.
And I guess, like you said, I think it's a good point. And sometimes, and I know as an agent, you have to look at these things, but you pay now, you pay later, you pay in different ways, right? So
right.
Like you were saying, it's a very good point. They didn't have to pay prospects. They brought back their own guy. They know what they're getting. They know, the type of player he is. They know the type of person he is, which he happens to be. I know him a little bit too. A great guy. A good citizen, who's not going to get you to have any issues. And then, so you're not giving up any of those things. And like you said, maybe they paid a little bit more or gave a little bit more in terms of, years or whatever. But at the end of the day, you get what you pay for. And, it sounds like it's a great, signing for them. And I think, even though it's probably a little bit more than maybe some people anticipated or whatever.
Yeah. And since it's longer than we expected, they can figure that out in 5 or 6 years from now. I don't think he's going to stay in center field for the whole contract. I think in a perfect world, the Mets have some young stud center fielder emerge from the farm system in a few years, maybe Alex Ramirez, who's a prospect name to keep in mind, and move Nimmo to a corner. But that is very much a question that they can answer when they get to it.
And as it's been documented very well throughout the media over the last, couple of weeks, I mean, the Mets are built to win now. They're not, I don't think they're as concerned about what's going to happen in 6, 7, 8 years from now. I think they want to, Steve Cohen bought the team, came in, had a plan, wants to bring a championship back to Queens, and to any pieces to those puzzles they can do. This makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely, yeah. Win now, win immediately, win a lot. When Steve Cohen bought the team 2 years ago, he said he wants to win his first World Series title in 3 to 5 years. And now we're down to 1 to 3 years on that. So the pressure is on, the payroll is up, and the Mets are doing what they feel they have to do to contend. So it actually puts them in a very interesting position, because they have by far the highest payroll in the history of the majors, somewhere around $350 million right now. But they're also not the clear number one team in the division. The Braves are really good. The Phillies just made it to the World Series and seem to be getting better this offseason. So they're going to have their work cut out for them, and the NL East is going to be a lot of fun to watch.
So Tim, a question here. Do you think the Mets are following the Dodger model from a few years back when the Dodgers got new ownership and they just started buying players? Because now the Dodgers are not money conscious, but they want to hover around, a good number, which is why I think they didn't sign a lot of these players this offseason. And they just, listen, as a Met fan, they must be happy, right? Like after dealing with the Wilpons for so many years. But I think ultimately, I think Steve Cohen is a businessman. And I think he even knows at some point you got to get young, you got to get young prospects in, because you can't have and maintain a payroll of $400 million just because you can. I think, you have to be smart about that.
That's exactly right. The Mets actually are pretty transparent about this when they speak publicly to reporters, when they have behind-the-scenes conversations with agents, that they're throwing money at the problem right now, and that is not the long-term plan. In a few years, you're going to see payroll come down because they hope they'll have good young prospects who make a relative pittance to slot into the starting lineup instead. So you mentioned the Dodgers model. That's exactly right. The Dodgers, when they got bought maybe a decade ago now, they threw a ton of money at the problem, and they had the biggest payrolls, and they had all these expensive guys, while behind the scenes and under the surface level major league stuff, they were working on the farm system, working on their scouting staff to find those diamonds in the rough like Max Muncy. So the Mets are in that stage right now where they have the luxury of sort of papering over the holes on the major league roster with money and free agents. But they hope to continue to follow the Dodgers model by, and sustainable is kind of the buzzword that, any front office uses these days, but they want to be sustainable and have their homegrown players, constitute a majority of the roster. And then they can, fill in the gaps with free agents. As opposed to this year when they needed to rebuild more than half the active roster via free agency.
Sure. And I think that's, coming from a Yankee fan, some of the unfair criticism of the Yankee organization, where they don't want to spend money. And, this is, obviously this is before these two signings, right? Yeah. And I, in my mind, I was always of the mindset of like, they're not cheap, they're spending money, but you can't just, at some point you got to develop players to be able to sustain what you have, to your point. And so I think, right now, listen, I think Hal Steinbrenner felt a little pressure, right? Seeing all these big signings, seeing Steve Cohen sign all these players. But I think ultimately they're on the right path, as are the Dodgers. To me, the outlier are the San Diego Padres.
Yeah.
They're just going bonkers.
Yeah, I don't really know the plan there, but credit to the Padres for just going balls to the wall and getting all these shortstops. So I don't know how it's going to work out, but I'm really looking forward to finding out.
So Tim, obviously we're seeing some additional things going on now with the Mets. We saw Omar Narvaez got signed yesterday, who's a guy who's had some success and been able to swing the bat a little bit as a catcher. He's an interesting ad for them. I'm sure it sounds like maybe the price was right there for him to add him to the mix. Obviously, they have some payroll there with McCann. It sounds. I would imagine he's somebody that they're actively trying to make a deal for, that he might be a better fit elsewhere. What other things do the Mets have cooking, or what else is there still to be done besides the obvious things that have happened already?
Well, they have done a lot of the heavy lifting. So from here on out, I suspect it's going to be smaller moves. That's not to say that they're less important, but they won't be, future Hall of Famer Justin Verlander, for example.
Yes.
It's not going to be bring back Diaz or Nimmo or bringing in Kodai Senga. So from here on out, what they need is at least one reliever. I would say maybe two. I'm talking established relievers, not a Rule 5 flyer guy. And they also could use another hitter, a fourth outfielder. I'm not sure exactly what form that is going to take. I think it would behoove the Mets to find somebody who can actually play center field. They really like Starling Marte. They like leaving him in right field. Mark Canha played some center last year, but you'd rather not have to rely on that. So they need another hitter of some sort, whether it's a speed and defense for the outfielder kind of guy, or a corner outfielder who can DH and hit quite a bit. That remains to be seen. But they're, keeping their options open, and I expect them to add another position player, outfielder, one way or another.
Is it realistic? I mean, is it JD Martinez or someone like that, a professional hitter like that? Is that somebody you think realistically an option still after everything that's happened?
I at this point, I can't rule anything out. At a week or two ago, I mean, let's say 2 weeks ago, I would have said JD Martinez, Michael Brantley, those sort of, Jose Abreu before he signed, those sort of very established veteran hitters, as you said, would have been maybe out of their price range for what the role is going to be. But now I don't want to say anything is out of their price range because they're already at 350. What's the difference between 350 and 360 or 370? You know what I mean? So I'm not sure that the Mets really have a ceiling practically. So, Conforto is another name that gets mentioned by the fan base a lot. I'm not sure that there's a fit there, but
yeah. I thought kind of Conforto maybe before if Nimmo left, I thought that might have made some sense, but I don't know. So
Tim, why not Conforto?
And this is just an educated guess on my part, but I think Conforto is going to want a spot where he has a clear path to everyday playing time, as opposed to working himself in as a fourth outfielder, DH, play most of the time, but not all the time sort of deal. Because he's looking for a short-term contract with an opt-out, Scott Boras said. So, he's going to want to reestablish himself.
So with that said, would it make more sense for him to go to a team, say like the Reds, where he's going to get that playing time, and he knows that, he may not be there the second half of the year because he could get traded to a contender?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly right. I think, if you're Michael Conforto, if I'm Michael Conforto, winning, frankly, would be secondary this season in picking a team. I want to play every day. And then if he plays well and gets traded to a contender, that works out. You get the best of both worlds. So, I think the Yankees, they're looking for a left fielder. I think Conforto would be a perfectly good option for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think, listen, Benintendi's out, name's been out there, but I actually like Conforto because, when you have a motivated player, left-hander, Yankee Stadium.
Yep.
It's not a bad fit.
He wouldn't have to shave also.
He wouldn't have to shave. In your opinion, which Met is going to be missed the most this year?
Chris Bassett. He was their best, most reliable starter beginning to end in 2022. He petered out a little bit at the end when the team collectively petered out.
Everybody did.
Yeah. The Mets did well to reshape and rebuild their rotation, but they're gonna miss Bassett. I think if you look at what Senga got, $15 million a year, versus what Bassett got, $21 million a year,
and we don't know
$6 million. That $6 million would have been might have been worth it to keep Bassett, but so he's my guess.
What did he want to come back?
He sounded open to it. I think for what the Mets were looking to spend for that slot in the rotation, he sounded a little bit out of the price range, but then he ended up with a 3-year deal that was not as expensive as I thought he was going to get. I thought he was going to get 4 or 5, even though he's a little older, 34 years old already. So he did have that qualifying offer, which weighed him down. It is what it is. Good addition for the Blue Jays.
Yeah, no, great. I think that's a great addition for them. I mean, he's a bulldog. I think the whole thing of him, the whole remarks about playing in New York, pitching in New York in the postseason, I think that kind of got overblown in my opinion.
I think so too.
I think he's a guy from, that I saw that, when they traded for him, I was like, man, I wish the Yankees would have got him, because he just seems like a bulldog and who's fearless. Now, when you're put in the position, where you got to win, right? A lot of these Oakland A's guys really haven't had that pressure of being in the postseason and trying to compete. But I thought he was a great pitcher. I thought he was a good addition. I agree with you. I think he's going to be missed. I think Taijuan Walker is going to be missed. He was one of those guys. He was streaky, but I felt like, for the money he got, he was, pretty good.
Yeah, he was excellent. He was an all-star his first year with the Mets, was almost an all-star his second year, and had some weird second half both times. But yeah, he and Bassett were critical to the Mets when they were down without DeGrom and without Scherzer for parts of that year.
So their catching situation now, we know they have the number one prospect who's a catcher. They just signed a catcher. What do you think they ultimately do?
The other thing is, Tim, before you say that, I mean, Tomas Nido, I mean, he had a very good year last year.
Yep.
They had chances to get catchers. They turned him down because I think they didn't want to upset the apple cart because he's a good receiver. Pitchers like to throw to him. I mean, to me, he's a guy you want no matter what you do, this guy's got to be in the mix.
You got four catchers now.
They have four
but that's what I'm saying. So that's why it's complicated.
They have four catchers. It is complicated, way more complicated now than it was 24 hours ago with Omar Narvaez in the fold. They have Narvaez, McCann, Nido, and Francisco Alvarez. My educated guess is McCann is not on the roster one way or another. I think they're going to look for a trade partner for him. Bringing in Narvaez for $8 million next year with a $7 million player option for the next season tells me that they see him playing at least half of the time.
Wow.
And I'm with you, Chris. I like Tomas Nido. Great defensive catcher, caller or game caller. Pitchers like throwing to him. And he's got, I don't know what to make of, clutch stats or whatever.
No, but you're 100. I was just going to say that
100%. He's got a knack for coming through in big spots, even though his offensive numbers overall are nothing to.
No, but you know what? It's funny. As someone who's paid attention to catchers through the years, like it seems like guys like him are just such valuable players, and they always seem to be like one of the more clutch hitters. Even though, like you said, you wouldn't say, look at that Mets team and go, here's one of their better hitters. Right. But when there's a key situation, that guy seems to always come through.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see that with a guy like that. It's just a guy. He's just a gamer who knows the game, smart player, great receiver. Guy people really like, and guys like that's the type of guy who
every team needs
20 years from now he's probably gonna be managing somewhere because those are the guys who always end up becoming managers. So
and he'll play 10 more years because some team's always gonna want a guy like that. Yep,
100%.
Yep.
Maldonado from the Astros is an example.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Man, it's good to be a catcher and a left-handed pitcher, man. Right?
Catcher can catch.
So I think
exactly.
I think they go Narvaez, Nido, and then make Alvarez force his way into the picture, maybe as a DH, sometimes catching sort of deal.
Do you think Francisco is a cat? Like, I mean, listen, that's his position, but like, is he a catcher who's a hitter or a hitter who's a catcher?
Oh, he's a hitter who's a catcher. Absolutely. The defense is said to lag well behind the offense, obviously, because the offense is spectacular and carried him through the minors very quickly. So there's a lot to like there in the bat. And we're going to see how he develops. That's why I like the idea of doing what the Braves did this past year with William Contreras, where if the catching skills are so-so, have him do that some of the time, ease him in, have him learn with Narvaez and Nido and McCann or whoever's there, and then let him hit a lot of the time by being a DH and take advantage of that part of his skill set. And then, just kind of see how it sorts out over the course of the first couple of years.
I thought the Mets put him in a tough position last year by bringing him up when they brought him up and put him in the role they put him in time for that series in Atlanta. I thought that, again, it was just my opinion. I thought they should have called him if they were going to call him up. And again, maybe this was maybe there were other circumstances, and you might know better than me, but I thought they should have called him up in September 1 and let him get his feet wet, and then hope, instead of just throwing him into it. Sometimes, you get lightning in a bottle, but I thought they put him in a bad situation, not in a bad situation, in a difficult situation for a young guy like that.
They did. Yeah. And you mentioned September 1. You can make an argument that they should have done it even before that in July, when they're trying to figure out what to do at DH, what to do at catcher before the trade deadline. See what you have. If he's not ready, that's fine. Send him back to the minors. No rush. He's only 20 years old at the time.
Yeah.
So they absolutely agreed. They put him in a weird spot. They put him in a tough spot. The guy was driving home to Florida for the offseason.
Yeah.
And they called him and said, actually, come to Atlanta. It's the biggest series in years, and we might put you on the roster, but at least come. So it was weird. It was
the next thing you know, he was DHing in those games, and it was like,
batting against Kenley Jansen with the game on the line, leaving his bat on swings, very tough. I think he'll be fine as a player. I don't think it's going to be some career crisis for him, but
no, not at all. But
I don't think so either.
It was bad.
Yeah. Now, Tim, is Brett Beatty the third baseman opening day?
No, I don't expect that. And they have Eduardo Escobar under contract. That's not such a big contract that they can't figure it out if they really wanted Brett Beatty.
Yeah.
But I think back to August when they called Brett Beatty up. The day before they called him up, the Mets were of the belief that he was not ready for the majors, particularly defensively. Next thing you know, Escobar's hurt, has to go on the IL. Brett Beatty's in the majors. Homer's on his first at-bat. That worked out. Overall, in like 10 or 12 games, he didn't hit very much. But this is a guy who the Mets deemed not ready the day before they called him up when they basically had to call him up in an emergency situation. So I think best case scenario for the Mets and for Brett Beatty is come into spring training, show what you got, and maybe force their hand. If he forces their hand, power to him, whether that's in spring training or crushing in AAA in April or whatever it is. But I don't expect him to be this opening day third baseman.
And where does Mark Vientos fit into this? Where how do they see him?
That's a good question. I think the Mets are also asking that. It's a guy who has a ton of power, hit a ton of home runs in the upper minors at a very young age. So there's a lot to like there. But he also strikes out a lot. He's not a good third baseman. As much hesitation as the Mets have about Brett Beatty at third, they have more about Vientos. So they've tried him at first base. He DH'd a lot last year. So there's enough power there that you want to hope it works out. But I don't think they really know how it's going to work out, whether it's going to be a long-term DH situation or what. But, toward the end of the year, it's worth noting at least, or worth keeping in mind, at least for me, that Buck Showalter, I think, started to come around on Vientos because Vientos realized what it takes to succeed in the majors, according to Buck. Got a little taste of it, realized how hard you have to work. So I'll be curious to see what Vientos does come spring training.
He's a good looking player. I mean, you could see like he's got some potential, and you see like with both those guys really with their builds and kind of the way they swing the bat, you could see like Alex Bohm type guys, for the Mets.
Sure.
So they're certainly interesting guys to keep in mind, and see where they, this town might not be big enough for the two of them though.
That's true.
I don't think so.
They made it work. They made it work with Pete and Dom at first base for a little while there, but I guess in hindsight, maybe it never really did work out for Dom.
No, exactly.
Where do you think Dom ends up?
Some team that'll let him play first base every day because he's an awfully good first baseman.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you off the top of my head which teams might be on that list. But he's a classic change of scenery, rebound candidate type of guy who, let him play first every day, see where what the bat is right now. And
he's like a February signing.
Yeah.
And
speaking of February signings, Lou, Tim, do you think the Met? I mean, and again, obviously, I know you said all bets are off at this point, but I mean, do they play some of these out, and see if somebody falls, who somebody doesn't sign, and whether it's a JD Martinez type of guy or someone like that down the road, and then say, hey, wait a minute, hey JD, look, you're getting offers for this. We could give you this if you want to just, come with us now. And I mean, do you see something like that as a possible scenario?
Totally. The Mets had such a burst of activity and did so much of their to-do list the last couple of weeks that, the Mets can sit back and wait and see what develops and see if there are any deals to be had over the next month or two, as spring training approaches. So they're in the pressure's off for them, roster building wise, mostly. They got all the big stuff done. So now they can see what else develops and what else might benefit them, as you said, in sort of a deal to be had way.
And Vogie, what about Vogie?
Oh boy, I don't know. He's got one skill, and the Mets seem to value him for that one skill. And he doesn't make a lot of money, only $1.5 million next year. So I think the Mets would be best off if Vogelback is a bench bat type of guy next year, and they have some other solution at DH or most of the time at DH. So
Well, I hope he gets an opportunity to play because my 9-year-old is obsessed with him.
Yeah, I think
the best walk-up music in baseball.
Right, a lot of Mets fans are, and he's a lovable character. So I get that, but it's sort of a if the Mets end up carrying 3 catchers like they say they're open to, and they have Vogel back, they start to handcuff themselves a little bit, even with guys like McNeil and Guillorme who can move around a bunch.
That's true.
What do they do with Carrasco?
I think they keep Carrasco. I know there's talk about him maybe being traded, and I'm sure they're listening because they have to listen, but it's not like their number 6, 7, and 8 starters are so good that you have to make room. David Peterson was really good for them. Last year is probably the next man up, but somebody's going to get hurt in spring training. If David Peterson's in the rotation to open the season, that's not surprising at all. I just don't think they should rob themselves of that depth now by trading Carrasco.
Yeah, and you never know if spring training some other team could be have a pitcher go down and need a pitcher.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think they'd be wise to hold on to Carrasco, at least for now.
Yeah, no, he's a solid pitcher. He's a solid pitcher.
Yeah.
Where do you think the Mets end up come October?
Put me on the spot there.
I mean, it's a tough division. I mean, that's why I'm asking, because all 3 teams at the top.
As I think I said earlier,
in Florida, the Marlins pitching staff is no joke.
The Marlins pitching staff is no joke. They need to get a hitter or two. One of these years they
3.
have to. Right? Yeah. Good point. One of these years you figure they're going to be at least a little interesting. That wasn't this past year, besides Sandy Alcantara days, but maybe one of these years. But as far as the NL East as a whole, I cannot confidently pick the Mets to win the division. I think the Braves are the team to beat until proven otherwise. They've won the division, 5 years in a row now. Yeah. The Phillies made it to the World Series, added Trey Turner. They're going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Phillies are going to be hurt by losing Bryce Harper for the first half of the year.
They made out okay without him for June, July, August when they were without him. So,
true.
That's I think they can get by without him. But the top 3, Braves, Phillies, Mets, they can finish in any order, and I wouldn't be surprised.
And like you said, it's a lot of it's luck and who can stay healthy and what key guys can don't go down or and sometimes it's like you said, it's these moves that all these teams seem pretty set now, but some of these little moves end up being the big moves at the end of the day.
Yeah, and then you got the trade deadline too, right? And so who knows what happens at the trade deadline? Who the Mets pick up? It's a game changer. I mean, how many times have we seen it over the years? You get the right player at the right time who gets hot.
Right. Yep, that's exactly right. So there's a lot to be decided, and a lot of games to be played. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I think the Mets will make the playoffs. And once you get in, if you have Scherzer and Verlander going the way they can be going, then you like your chances.
Well, you said it right there, though. That they have to be going the way they can be going, because last year with DeGrom and Scherzer, they weren't going the way they could be going.
No.
And that's their end of the stretch. They were no different than any of the other guys, and they were not shutting anybody down. And that was the difference between the Mets, ending up where they ended up, and instead of ending up in the World Series like the Phillies did. So
just
comes down to that
too. But that cost them their season basically.
No question about it. Because everybody was waiting for that all year. Because all year, even when those guys were in and out of the lineup and hurt and on and off healthy, they. At the end there, everybody kept on saying, "Oh, wait till they're healthy and wait till they just down the stretch they were healthy. They just didn't get it done." So, so Tim, I know you got to run to Yankee Stadium.
I do.
We really appreciate you coming on. It was great to have you. It was good conversation. Hopefully we'd like to get you back at some point soon, maybe down the road. But thank you so much for joining us, and we'll have a great holiday, and we'll talk to you. We'll talk to you real soon.
Right back at you. Thank you very much for having me.
All right, Tim Healy from Newsday, great dude, knowledgeable,
beyond knowledgeable.
Very knowledgeable. The thing I like about Tim, he's not a know-it-all. He's not in your face, but when you present him with the questions, he gave you great answers and very well thought of, and obviously, doing, knows his craft and knows what he has to do and knows his job and knows that team inside and out. So it was cool to talk to him about the Mets. And I'm sure our Mets fans in the audience enjoyed the banter back and forth with Tim. So Lou, we talked about the Mets. You had touched on Carlos Correa. The Giants are an interesting team. Obviously, they have the best defensive shortstop in the league over the last decade for sure, and in Brandon Crawford. So that's going to be interesting to see what they do. They haven't really. I guess he has one more year left.
The Yankees, he's the third baseman. His brother-in-law.
Oh, who's his brother-in-law?
Garrett Cole.
Oh shoot! So wait, but I heard that the Yankees. I'm sorry. I heard that Correa was open to possibly playing third base while I guess Crawford played his last year or whatever.
$350 million. I think he
might be able to twist his arm.
He might be able to twist his arm. I think, and to speaking to that, I love the player. I mean, listen, it's not my team, it's not my money, but to me, it was, vastly overpaid for this player. He's a good player. There's all this talk about San Francisco needing a marquee name, to bring the fans back. He doesn't bring the fans back, in my opinion. Solid player, and in the playoffs, you make the playoffs. There's nobody more that I would want on my team, but to me, he's not a game changer.
I don't know if he's that dude like you're saying, and I kind of agree with that. I like him as a player. I think he's obviously a talented and gifted player. He can hit, he can field, good dude, all that stuff.
I think the Giants just got desperate.
Is he a game changer? I mean,
in the playoffs,
Scott Boras will tell you yes. I don't know that he is. I do like him, but you know what? I think the market is what the market is. I think when the Mets got Lindor, they were criticized for spending all that money on him, and it took them a little time, but now I think everybody thinks that the Mets got a good deal on that. And
yeah, sure.
So again, Correa is an interesting one. He's still very young. He came up young, obviously had a lot of success, played on a championship team. So he's an interesting guy. I think that's going to be a fun one to see how it plays out, because the Giants are always an interesting organization. It seems like when the Giants have less marquee players, they somehow win, and it's an odd thing that they have going there. But they're going to be fun to watch this year. And obviously Carlos would be leading the charge there.
Can somebody tell me what the hell the Red Sox are doing? You let Bogarts go, right? Fine. You let him go. You don't feel he was worth what he was asking. Understood. But now there's talk about Swanson, right? I'm like, you had your guy who could play in Boston, who put up numbers for you, a year older, right? 1 year older. You signed this outfielder who, by all accounts, from what I've been hearing, people, like him. He's not a bad player, but they paid $90 million for this guy. It just doesn't seem to me that they have any sort of direction as to where they're going.
Well, I mean, listen, everybody's got their own course of action. And I think the Red Sox obviously have had a lot of success over the past couple of decades. And, they've won a lot of games. I don't know where they rank on the list, but they're certainly one of the top ones, organizations. Chaim Bloom is a good baseball guy who's been there a few years. I think they've undergone a metamorphosis with a number of things. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Obviously, a lot of their guys that they had, so to speak, are it's kind of a changing of the guard up there. So we'll see where. I think they still have a lot of things to do. I'm a fan of Chaim. I think he's a good baseball guy, and he's a good guy, good person. And I think they have a good group up there. I'm confident they'll figure it out. I'm not really sure all the ins and outs of Bogarts and how that played itself out. I can understand where you're coming from as a fan, but I mean, so as we always say, there's a lot of times more to it than that. I watched Bogarts. I remember him coming up. I had a bunch of clients on, came up with him in the organization when they were in low A ball, and thinking what a terrific looking ball player he was, and he's really had a good career, and I'm sure that'll continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen,
in his new home. So
the Red Sox fans, were up in arms, to me, and rightly so, because he's everything you want in a player, right? He's your guy. He's, champion. I just found it kind of odd that they would now look at this route, but
I can understand that. But listen, Dansby Swanson's a terrific ball player. If that's the route they end up going with, I mean, I wouldn't certainly knock that, because I think Dansby, and again, there's financial things that
and that's what I'm saying. By the way, Dansby, he's a world champion as well, and a solid
I tell you what, I just, there's something about that guy. I just like him. He just seems like a good dude, and I don't know him. But there's something about that guy. He's a good ball player, and seems like a nice, a good person and stuff. So I mean, I'm sure he's going to be a great addition to whoever he ends up, joining up.
Yeah, no, I believe that. I believe that. Carlos Rodon, man, I if you would have told me a week ago, I would have said, just throwing numbers, 7 years, maybe 200. To get him at 162 was, I don't want to say a bargain because it's 162, but that's what you paid CC Sabathia.
That was a long time ago, Lou. When CC signed the contract, that was a long time ago.
So to get that kind of money,
the game has changed. There's a lot more money out there now.
No, but that's my point. Like, he got paid the same as CC did,
right?
2008, and now we're in 2022.
Yeah, but I think also CC, and CC was the man. I think Carlos is a great pitcher, but he's not the man. He's the best guy that's left on the market.
Well, listen, I think two things. I think one, the good thing for him is he doesn't have to be the man, right? The Yankees have Garrett Cole, so that pressure immediately is lifted from him, because he's not coming in as the savior, right? So I think that helps him out a little bit.
Yeah, but I think he has to. He's got to be very, very good. He's not. He's gonna hear it.
He's gonna hear it. I mean, listen, you can go down the laundry list of Yankee
because
Pavano.
I mean, that's a lot of money, and he's a guy who's been successful. He's got a great track record of being a very solid pitcher. So we'll see. We're going to see how that goes, but he's going to feel the pressure if he gets off to a bad start. I am 100% sure of that,
without question. And speaking to that, I don't expect this, by the way, because he's such a solid pitcher. But Verlander, do there's that, there's still that fan base who's going to miss DeGrom, who loves DeGrom no matter what. It wasn't as such a loud of a voice as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I have to say, I think the Mets fans surprisingly have accepted DeGrom.
I agree.
Leaving a lot easier than I thought they would have. But I think the fact that he really struggled down the stretch, and the fact that he's been had a lot of injury issues over the past couple of years are the main reasons for that. And then when you go and sign Verlander after what he just did and what he's done over the last,
he's a stud.
Then it's very hard to criticize them. If they just sat on their hands after that, I think it would have been a little bit. There would have been a lot more backlash with DeGrom leaving. But I think the Mets fans definitely had their I'd say concerns that Jacob wouldn't live out his contract as Jacob DeGrom, as he's known now, as a top of the line, top of the rotation, best pitcher in the game type of guy. So I think they it was, yes, there's some sentimental value, and here's a guy who went and did his job, kept his mouth shut, and did a great, obviously beyond great job as the number one guy for the Mets over the past 6-7 years. But I think the prevailing thought among Mets fans, living in the New York area and hearing a lot of them regularly, was that the best of him might have been done with, and we'll see. I mean, I wouldn't certainly when you have greatness like that, you can't write them. You can never write them off, because sometimes that's when those guys come back and do what they do. And you see it in, other sports, whether it's a Michael Jordan or whoever, a Brett Favre or whoever it is. These guys have these, Tom Brady, these guys have this. There's something that's gotten them to where they've gotten. And
is that you think as an agent, and you're talking to your client, do you think what makes them so great is also their stubbornness, right? Where, they don't want to hear no. I can do this.
I think it's just the mentality and them knowing themselves. Most of them, really. Yeah, I mean, you could say that. And some guys don't. Some guys don't get healthy. And listen, I think if God willing, DeGrom stays healthy and outperforms his contract, I mean, that would be amazing for the Rangers and their fans and everything. But again, I don't think anybody would be surprised if Jacob DeGrom, came up, hurt his arm in spring training and struggled through the next few years. I mean, so it's a tough situation. It's an interesting one to certainly follow and see how it's going to play. But I think Jacob made a decision that he was, I think he wasn't a real, I think he wanted to be on a ranch or a farm somewhere and be left alone. And, no state tax is nice. And, there's
the agent in you talking.
That's the show, the agent and the fan. So, it's nice. And so I think for him, it's, he got what he wanted as I'm sure he wouldn't trade his years with the Mets in, but, so
well, listen, this hot stove league is not over. We still have a long ways to go, but I think it's going to be, to me, I think it's going to be a great year. A lot of good storylines, starting in April. But, again, we're not done yet.
No, let's see what happens in the next week, because I think we got probably middle of next week, it'll start ramping down as people get ready for the holidays. But, let's see what happens. We're going to be back next week. We had at least one more show before the holiday. So we got a couple of things lined up. So stay tuned to that. We're going to go now. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us.
And we'll see you guys next time.